had to get the trail shoulder to the floor in the downswing position, because this is something that I get a lot of questions about with students, and they tend to get misconceptions. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that golfers tend to think you've got to keep your right arm bent in the downswing, okay? And that's not true, right? What needs to happen, and this is why I do like the skimming a stone analogy. If you had two people skimming a stone, okay, and they're both skimming the stone of equal distance, equal amount of skims, equal amount of distance in terms of total that it ends up going, then let's just argue that the arm is working at a constant speed, so it's very similar for both of them, okay? So therefore, to generate speed, what has to happen is this arm is going to have to straighten. So if I keep this arm completely bent, I'm never going to be able to skim that stone and release it, right? You try and literally keep it at 90 degrees and release it, there's no way that you're going to generate any force, right? But both of those arms are working at a constant speed. However, when we look at those two people, we have one who's very low, like this, and one who's slightly more upright, like this. So the one who's more upright, the arm's going to look straighter. The one who's lower, the arm's going to look more bent. But the point that I'm trying to make is the reason why the arm looks bent is not because there's a consciousness to hold onto the bend, it's because the right shoulder is lower to the ground. So as I talk about this with students, and I talk about the idea of generating speed, you have to allow your right arm to straighten. Okay, if I keep my right arm bent, I can't release the club. So the first thing to understand is that don't try and keep your right arm bent. Your right arm will look more bent because your right shoulder is lower to the ground, which then brings us on to the question, how do you do that? And the answer is through tilts. The way you get tilts is by shifting the pelvis to the left. So as I'm coming into this downswing position here, what I'm really doing is I'm trying to get the feeling of turning my belt buckle in towards my right leg. Or, for lack of a better expression, the old turning the nut into the leg, as some pros have often called it, right? So that's one of the feelings that a lot of people have talked about. So Hogan used to talk about the turning the right nut into the leg, right? Now, excuse me if that seems a little crude for some of you, but that is a pretty strong sort of feeling that often gets recited sometimes in lessons. That might not be applicable for everyone who watches this video, but I think if you get the feeling of turning the belt buckle in towards the leg, the point is that if you're kind of moving this way, as opposed to really screwing in towards that left leg, as I'm demonstrating here, then this is making sure the pelvis is moving enough left, and that is what's going to produce more of a tilt. So one of the things that I'll sometimes do with students who struggle with rotation is I use my old orange whip board. And in the backswing position, I talk a lot about using a foot wedge because it helps keep this leg flexed. But it's the same here. So if you were to lift your left leg higher, you know, for golfers who move like this, you see, it really encourages you to get the feeling of moving. You see the way I'm moving into that left side. Now, as we start the downswing and then we swing through, then that leg can kind of straighten and come back. But the point is that you need to make sure this pelvis is moving enough to the left. And the reason for that is we're not talking about speed and vertical ground force here. What we're basically talking about is the importance of tilts. So if you can start to move that pelvis towards that left-hand side, what I'm essentially saying is your pelvis will become tilted like this, which means your shoulders will become tilted, and that's how you're going to get that right shoulder lower to the ground. See you soon.